us live today. There we go.
I'm taking you live.
Thank you, Sheree. All right, welcome to the meeting of the Capital Budget Subcommittee. We have a full agenda today. We'll get right into it starting with BPW. Patrick Frank is our analyst. Mr. Frank, welcome. You're on.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. You should be able to see it now. Okay, and in the interest of time, all I'm going to talk about is the recommendation and things that have changed since the last year. If you have questions about anything else, feel free to ask them. The recommendations are to concur with all of the appropriations as they are in the budget. There are three programs that had some changes to them. The first is the Construction Contingency Fund. This was not supposed to get any money this year, but now there's $5 million in it. The reason is that there's a lot of large programs going on, and they want to make sure that there is enough money for them if something is a little bit more expensive, especially in a time of supply chain issues and higher inflation. Also, they did waive the limit, which is 1.25% of the CDAC recommendation. So the fund balance is going to be a little bit higher than it is in the past, but I think there's good reason for that. The second one that changed, actually four changed, is the Facilities Renewal Fund. This one you've probably heard about in the dedicated purpose account. There's an additional $75 million. And also they increased the GEO amount from a little bit over $21 million to $35 million. This is in response to, I can show you charts about the big backlog, but I don't think that's necessary. I think this committee is aware of that. Third change has to do with the State House restoration. What happened here is a little bit more cost, but mostly there was not supposed to be any construction money this year, and now there's $26 million. They've basically moved this program forward, and the same has happened with Guilford Avenue. Same situation, they've moved some money forward. And with that, I'll conclude my remarks and be ready for questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Frank, for the presentation. Any questions for our analyst? Just let the presentation clear so I can see if there's anyone with their hand raised. I don't see anybody jumping up, so we'll move to our agency. Secretary Churchill is here. Mr. Secretary, welcome.
Good afternoon, Chairman Barnes and Vice Chair Chang, members of the subcommittee. For the record, I'm Ellington Churchill, Secretary for the Maryland Department of General Services, and today I have with me Nelson Reichert, who's the deputy for our department, and Courtney League, who's our acting assistant secretary for the Office of Design, Construction, and Energy. And on behalf of the hard-working and dedicated employees of General Services, I want to thank you for the opportunity to once again appear before you today regarding our department's capital budget. The committee has our testimony, and so I'll keep my comments brief. The business of the department continues to be robust when dealing with capital construction. In the current fiscal year, DGS has awarded over $60 million in new projects and completed more than $50 million in ongoing capital projects. And currently we have more than 130 projects in design with an estimated value of more than $755 million. I would like to thank Mr. Frank for his analysis of our FY23 capital budget request. Mr. Frank, as usual, does a fantastic job in terms of understanding the department. He has noted 8 recommendations in terms of PAYGO and GEO bond funding. And Mr. Chair, the department concurs with all recommendations noted in the report. So being cognizant of the committee's time, we stand ready to answer any questions the committee may have at this time.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Any questions for the agency? Hearing none, thank you, sir, for being with us.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move to Maryland Department of Environment. Andrew Gray is our analyst. Mr. Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll now share my screen. So Maryland Department of the Environment's capital budget summary there. You should see the 10 programs in the allowance or authorization for fiscal 23. In terms of the recommended actions, DLS recommends concurring with all the PAYGO funding. And in terms of the general obligation bond recommended actions, one differing from a complete concur was to strike language on the Conomingo Dam funding related to dredging from that particular program. So just that one component there, and as noted here, the rest of the recommendations are to concur. In terms of the big picture changes for the budget, basically the water quality revolving loan fund and drinking water revolving loan fund special funds go down. There's also a decrease in general obligation bond funding for the comprehensive flood program, and the Conowingo Dam watershed increases by 25 million, offsetting those decreases a little bit. In terms of the drinking water revolving loan funds, we just recommend that the agency comments on the use of drinking water revolving loan fund set aside funding for operations purposes. So it can use some of the money for operations purposes, and US EPA workload analysis indicated that the water supply program could use some funding. The agency is not supporting its operating program with the use of the drinking water revolving loan fund set asides. They're using that money instead for projects, which is laudable, but we're asking the agency to comment on why they're not using it for supporting at least partially the program due to the workload analysis that was reflected. In terms of the Bay Restoration Fund, just to highlight here that the Bay Restoration Fund is basically tapped out in terms of the ability to fund projects. We'll talk a little bit more about that as an issue. In the out years, fiscal 26 and 27, there's $45 million in general obligation bonds, increasing to $55 million in general obligation bonds projected for the need in this program. So obviously a lot of needs addressed by this particular, the Bay Restoration Fund. Mining remediation program, basically going to see some federal money coming in potentially for this program through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. The agency might be able to talk a little bit more about that. In terms of the big funding of the program, Conowingo Dam watershed increases by $25 million. This funding is to assist with the Conowingo watershed implementation plan, so separate watershed implementation plan from the other plans that the states are doing for Chesapeake Bay restoration. In terms of the funding is laudable, the Maryland Department of Environment is kind of stepping forward to kind of put this money out there. Kind of hopefully the other states will then follow suit in terms of providing their funding to potentially up to $50 million or $53 million needed per year. There's a financing strategy that's been drafted in terms of how this money would be used, most likely going through the Susquehanna River Basin Commission in terms of cost-effective agricultural best management practices in that the Susquehanna River watershed. But there's not full clarity on the use of that funding, especially since, kind of the inclusion of the dredging language in there as well. So it's not clear exactly what the funding is being allocated to. Therefore, DLS has relayed a number of questions here for the agency to consider, and also it recommends that the language once again be struck in terms of the Conowingo Dam dredging, since that does not seem to be appropriate in terms of the work that they're actually doing with this project. In terms of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act funding, a tremendous amount of money is coming in the next couple of years through fiscal 2020, federal fiscal 26, $880 million or so for the programs noted here. DLS recommends that the agency comments on the discretion they'll be given in terms of the use of that funding, and then also are they prepared to use the funding effectively and equitably. In terms of the Bay Restoration Fund, we talked a little bit about the kind of needs for general obligation bonds in the out years. Some of the reasons why reflected here. In terms of revenues, we're seeing a decline from 121 million to around 98 million in fiscal 21 in revenues. So it's a substantial decline in revenues. A couple of reasons have been put forward for why this is potentially the case. Timing of payments, the controller did extend a tax alert in terms of like the timing of when people need to pay their taxes. There's also the impact of telework and school closures. The idea being that when you're not at businesses using water, then the businesses do not have to pay the per person amount for that water use because it's not occurring. Therefore, there could be a decline in revenues due to that as well. Also potential for hardship exemptions, people seeking and getting hardship exemptions and not having to pay into the fund. But most likely is information recently provided by Maryland Department of the Environment indicating that a particular entity had not remitted payments, and that would then boost the level of funding for fiscal 2020 and 2021 as well, increasing to 124 million or so for fiscal 20 and then to 108 million for fiscal 21 instead of the 98 million. So that hopefully explains things, but if it is in fact something along the lines of the teleworking and people not paying in, based on the use of water at businesses, then that could be a concern going long term. In terms of the expenditures, two major categories here. The Clean Water Commerce Act funding is now $20 million a year for a separate purpose from the direct use of wastewater treatment plants. Therefore, that's coming out of the fund. And then also for fiscal 23 only, there's $15 million for the Tree Solutions Now Act. So then you have those in combination. That's obviously kind of reducing the amount of money that they're able to put out there for projects. And in terms of DLS's recommendation is to comment on the long-term sustainability of the Bay Restoration Fund, considering the partial explained revenue declines, recent legislation, and aggressive encumbrance schedules that do not appear to be realized, and actually kind of helps out a little bit if they're able to kind of pay things more over time. Unless there are any questions, I conclude the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Gray, for the great presentation. Delegate Bridges has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Gray, just going back to the Conowingo WIP, that 25 million sounds like is pretty big request. Is that just for 1 year or is that over multiple years in the CIP?
That is a 1 year request of $25 million. There's nothing in the future on the CIP at this point for that purpose. My understanding is that the idea is sort of put a placeholder out there and then kind of see how the policy plays out in terms of perhaps other states providing some of their money. They have provided some money in terms of financing study, but to my knowledge, have not put anything forward yet in terms of the actual kind of payment moving to effectuate kind of the plans for the program. But that is a 1 year, $25 million down payment in a sense.
So other states are contributing, but not to the amount of 25 million.
Well, just for the financing study, I think to kind of figure out how this would work, they would then need to actually contribute money for actual best management practices. And to my understanding, that has not occurred yet. The agency might be able to explain more about that.
Yep, I'll ask him. Thank you.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Gray? Hearing none, let's go ahead and move on to the agency. Secretary Grumbles is with us. Welcome, Mr. Secretary. You're on.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay? Thank you. Thanks to all the members and thanks also to Andrew Gray for his analysis. And I am delighted to present to you our capital budget. It's a strong budget. It includes $326 million across 10 programs for environmental infrastructure and economic development and public health protection, provides new funding for the Conowingo Dam watershed effort, and also $78 million through the Bay Restoration Fund to upgrade wastewater treatment plants, particularly in small and rural communities. We also are very focused on making the maximum best use of the bipartisan infrastructure law. The governor was a champion for that national legislation because he knew it would be put to good use in Maryland for the Bay and for our watersheds and economy, and for getting lead out of drinking water and dealing also with these forever chemicals, the PFAS chemicals that we have an action plan regarding. I'd like to just turn to the comments requested so we can get through these. There's some very important ones. For the PAYGO recommended actions on in your analysis, by the DLS analysis, we appreciate and we accept the recommendations to concur with the allowance for the Water Quality Revolving Loan Fund Program, the Hazardous Substances Cleanup Program, the Drinking Water Revolving Loan Fund Program, the Bay Restoration Fund Wastewater Program, the Bay Restoration Fund Septic System Program. Thank you very much. For the recommended actions involving GO bonds, we appreciate and accept the recommended actions for the flood program. It's a resiliency program as well. The mining remediation program, the supplemental assistance program for hardship communities, and the water supply finance assistance program. Thank you very much. We respectfully do not agree with the recommendation to strike the language regarding the environmental dredging and beneficial reuse for the Conowingo Dam watershed project. That project is integral to a holistic approach to pollution prevention, climate resiliency, and implementation of the multi-state innovative watershed implementation plan. Now, related to the drinking water loan program, we were asked to comment on the implications of not using project set-aside funding in FY23 to help fund the water supply program. We apply for these federal grant funds on an annual basis, so there is no negative implication of using the project set-aside funds in FY23 for capital costs, as we are doing, rather than operating costs. We can request up to double the set-aside funds in future grant applications if they're needed for operating expenses. We're also requested to discuss the Conowingo Dam watershed program, and Delegate Bridges, I appreciate your question. As I said, we don't agree with deletion of the $6 million environmental dredging and beneficial reuse project. With regard to the watershed implementation plan, this is truly a multi-state innovative approach that's been agreed to by all of the states with strong support from the federal government and some funding from all of the states to do the design and to come up with the different aspects to this innovative approach to the Susquehanna River Basin, which is integral to our success in restoring and protecting the Chesapeake Bay and the lower Susquehanna River. We have entered into an illegal arrangement in terms of the governance of this watershed implementation plan with the existing compact organization called the Susquehanna River Basin Commission. That letter of understanding would allow the commission, which Maryland is a member of, as well as Pennsylvania, New York, and the federal government, that the SRBC would serve as a financing authority for implementation of the watershed implementation plan. This is to recognize the interstate nature. So we're sending some money upstream because we know the benefits will flow downstream to Marylanders and the Chesapeake Bay and help us meet our bay restoration goals and deal with the Conowingo challenge that's also tied very much to Pennsylvania and New York. In its role, the Susquehanna River Basin Commission would enter into contracts, including grant agreements, receive and distribute funds for best management practices on the ground to reduce nutrient and sediment pollution and increase climate resiliency. Maryland and the other members of the Bay Program Partnership and the Commission on the Susquehanna River Basin Commission would oversee the implementation and the funding decisions made on this unique partnership. Another question I was asked was about the natural filtration practices. These environmental practices will be targeted in the most effective basins within the Susquehanna River watershed, having the greatest impact on the Chesapeake Bay water quality, as has been would be identified in the watershed implementation plan. Maryland agencies, from environment to agriculture to natural resources, we want this funding to be more specifically targeted to the natural filters, such as forest and grass buffers, that also provide climate resiliency for all of us downstream. There are also agricultural practices, such as nutrient management and soil conservation practices, that can help with ocean acidification and bay acidification, as well as help reduce drinking water pollution like nitrates. I was asked to comment on the mussels, the role of mussels in this watershed implementation plan. I'm referring to freshwater mussels. Like oysters in the bay, they are amazing cleaning machines. They are natural filters, and everyone is increasingly recognizing the power of putting them to work for bay water quality. It's also gaining momentum, mussel restoration, as a practice supported in other rivers besides the Susquehanna, including the Potomac River. So we're very excited about that, tapping into that natural, nature-based type of solution. The $25 million, why $25 million included in the capital budget? Governor Hogan recognized that even though we have a plan, a final plan, and we have all the governance in place, someone has to step up so that the other states and the federal government can match. So Maryland has stepped up and put $25 million into this capital budget. That is to jumpstart the financing, the efforts. We're into very positive discussions with Pennsylvania, Virginia, the federal government, New York. We know the Susquehanna River Basin Commission will put in $5 million. The beauty of this program is that it is also a public-private partnership. It's modeled on the mechanisms that make the Conservation Finance Act, which is moving through the General Assembly, very attractive, using some private capital and leveraging to launch a restoration economy throughout the Susquehanna River watershed with public funding and public accountability. Now, I was also asked to comment on the role of the private sector. Well, the idea would be that they would be bringing private capital to the state and government and federal government-led watershed implementation plan. We think it really can create a market, not just for water quality, but for carbon. So we're enthused about that. Lastly, I was asked to comment on the environmental dredging and beneficial reuse aspects of the watershed implementation plan. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we know that the sediment behind the dam and throughout the reservoir behind the dam is an increasing concern and problem, just like the growing amount of woody debris and trash can be. And we know with extreme weather events, it's very important to get some of this dredging done and put it to use by creating beneficial markets for innovative and beneficial reuse. So we do not agree with the recommendation to strike that $6 million going to MES. We don't agree with that recommendation. Two other issues, the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Bay Restoration Fund, we were asked to comment on. How much discretion does Maryland have? We are eagerly awaiting guidance from the federal government, particularly EPA, since we're getting so much funding. Our state is through the bipartisan infrastructure law for wastewater and drinking water and lead service line replacement and PFAS, the forever chemical strategies. So we expect to receive EPA guidance in the next few weeks. We have been pressing EPA. I've been joined by other state environmental secretaries to ensure that EPA and other federal agencies give states flexibility and accountability. We're committed to implementing the environmental justice components that come with the funding as well. And that's going to be important for disadvantaged communities. New funding is expected for the emerging contaminants and for lead service line replacement. Happy to answer any questions about that, but it's very important for us to not only replace lead service lines throughout the state, but also be able to deal with lead pipes and fixtures in schools and public buildings. We were also asked to comment on the long-term, I'm almost done, Mr. Chairman, by the way. We were asked to comment on the long-term sustainability of the Bay Restoration Fund. So legislation was enacted that allows for cost-effective enhanced nutrient removal upgrades to minor wastewater treatment plants, some of the smaller ones, beyond the 67 larger ones around the state. And so that's our first priority for the Bay Restoration Fund, consistent with state law. That also means that there will be reduced Bay Restoration funding for the other uses that are eligible. But that's where we use the bipartisan infrastructure law, as well as the Conservation Finance Act to generate more funding to supplement the Bay Restoration Fund. So I feel like it's very stable, and we have strong safeguards in place to continue the success with the Bay Restoration Fund. And as Andrew Gray mentioned, revenues were down for a period of time. We've identified part of the problem in that. It's been being corrected. And also we're moving beyond, hopefully, beyond the pandemic and the economic recession, and that will also help the Bay Restoration Fund. Last thing is just to emphasize that combined with the bipartisan infrastructure law and the private capital investment in environmental infrastructure enabled through the Conservation Finance Act, we believe that will provide environmental infrastructure funding to deliver co-benefits for water quality and climate action. So we're very enthused about that, and we very much appreciate your interest and support for strong capital budget for the Environment Department. Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to take any questions or comments or advice.
Secretary Grumbles, thank you for the thorough response to the analyst's discussion. Other questions? Delia Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, good to see you, Mr. Secretary.
Yes, sir. You too.
Just to go back again to that 25 million, is it your belief that other jurisdictions or even the federal government might match that funding, or are you looking for them just to include funding to help to go towards the Conowingo Web?
Well, I certainly would expect the other states and the feds to at least match that 25 million. We have a goal as lined out in the all state approved financing plan to have at least 53 million per year for the program. Our approach was, let's show just how important this is to get started. And 2025 cleanup date for the Bay is only a few years away. So let's put in 25 million. So my expectations are there will be significant funding from the federal government, but just as importantly from the other states, particularly, states like Pennsylvania. We're hoping that we don't know how much is going to be provided, but we know that this is a valued way to get more bang for our buck. So we're showing that 25 million is a great jump start. And can tell you that I'm in discussions with other environment secretaries and with federal EPA leadership to underscore just how important it is to match that funding and get going with the projects that are going to make a difference.
But you wouldn't currently, you aren't requiring, should the funding go through, you aren't requiring them to have
Well, with every regional collaboration I have ever been involved in, it's nudging, it's encouraging. We certainly have gotten the message from the EPA that it's time to put up. States needs to put some money on the table for this excellent plan that was developed, this innovative approach, and that's why Maryland stepped up. And I'm confident that there's going to be funding to get these projects going. And the Susquehanna River Basin Commission's committed $5 million. That's that compact organization representing Pennsylvania and New York and the federal government and us. So I anticipate additional funding.
Thanks. Mr. Chair, one more question, if I can. Just about the dredging. I know you disagree with us taking the dredging out. However, and you probably know better than me, with the amount of sediments that come through the Conowingo, do you really feel like after dredging one time that, if a major storm comes through, then, we wouldn't have to go back to dredging again? It seems like a quick fix rather than a long-term solution.
Right. And it's not a quick fix, but it's always been recognized as an environmental solution that has some costs. So the key is to develop the right markets and technologies. And increasingly, I really feel strongly about this, that we absolutely, from a climate resiliency and public safety standpoint, need to get some of that sediment moved from behind the dam and put to good use to shore up the land or to create ecosystem habitat. The dredging component, that $6 million, as Maryland Environmental Service is carrying out the effort, will help dredge some more of that material and help work with markets that can use that material for building material, for soil amendment, or for habitat creation. I see that as always as a complement, an important component beyond just the upstream pollution prevention. We all know the value of pollution prevention. Getting some of that dredged material out of there is also pollution prevention, because it has significant impacts, and the impacts are only going to grow worse as we get closer to hurricane season and storms. So I think it's a public safety and there's a real benefit to it. But never believe if someone says that's the quick fix. No, you've got to have an interstate partnership that focuses on pollution prevention far upstream of the dam. And that's why we like the Conowingo Watershed Implementation Plan.
Thank you, Secretary Grumbles. Delegate Geist.
Right. Yeah, thank you. I'm not a scientist by no means, but Mr. Secretary, would you agree that just by removing the sediment that's behind the dam now, that is the low-hanging fruit, especially during these big storm events? Because it's frustrating for me, on the shore, where we're doing our part. We've been doing our part for years, especially our farming community. And when we see this no confidence by the EPA earlier this month that this plan, they're not confident this plan is going to work, then they're talking about adding more restrictions and more responsibility to these other areas for nutrient reduction. That scares the hell out of us on the shore. Our farmers are already struggling. This is going to be a tough growing year, especially for our farmers going to grow corn because of the cost of fertilizer. And if they have to need any more, restrictions in their WIP plans or their TMDLs, if those goalposts continue to move for them, they're going to be in big trouble. And, and it's not just this industry, but it's also consumers as well. I mean, we're talking about food security here. So going back to the dredge material in the back, I mean, what we're being told multiple times from so many different sources that if we remove that dredge material, then we're not going to see the same scouring that we are during these major storm events. And I mean, it happens every single time because there is no room behind that dam at all at this point. We knew that for years. We've been saying it for years. Now the EPA is finally coming out this month saying, hey, you know what? Now we don't have much confidence in what we're doing.
Well, Delegate, I appreciate your comments on that. What our goal is to ensure that it's not only a low-hanging fruit, but that it's not a one-time fruit, that when you create a market for that dredge material and you get credit for some maintenance dredging, that is going to bring more funding for climate resiliency to remove a sufficient amount of that sediment, that dredge material, and having environmental co-benefits of getting it out from behind the dam. But it absolutely has to be coupled with pollution prevention upstream that then contributes to the sediment building up. So for us, the key is to have a multi-state partnership and also recognize that environmental dredging is one of the key tools for climate resiliency, reduced flooding, debris problems, and our nutrient sediment issues that we've got. Our TMDL requires more action to meet our goals by 2025. So I really do think an important component of that, not the only component, is to get some of that dredge material out of there and then create a real market for it where there's credit given for putting that material to better use and getting it out of the waterway.
Do you see the EPA or even your agency sometime in the future, your department in the future, moving the goalposts on as far as the where with the agriculture industry, with their BMPs, with their with their TDMDL numbers, and do you see those goalposts being moved at all potentially?
I know everybody wants to score, and so you're right. The science evolves. How far do we have to go? Where is the goalpost? I know what we're focused on is making sure the agricultural community continues to be a real partner in this. Maryland is a leader when it comes to agricultural best management practices. For us, one of the other strategies, Delegate, has been to focus on not just the wastewater treatment plants, which is a big part of the opportunity and the challenge, but to focus on the tailpipes and the smokestacks. The nitrogen deposition from around the region also contributes to the Chesapeake Bay TMDL problem. So continuing to focus on that strategy, as well as looking at that sediment and finally getting some real action. We feel we've taken some really important steps. The owner of the dam is putting a lot of money into the freshwater mussels and some of the BMPs and improving the flow regime and removing more debris and trash from behind the dam. I think that the dredging project can open up the door to even more success when coupled with the upstream pollution prevention that other states and the Conowingo WIP are going to be funding.
Can I ask one more follow-up question? It has nothing to do with the dam. It has to do with the Bay Restoration Fund. We're talking about the money in that fund drastically being reduced compared to where at the levels that they were. Are you becoming more concerned about these wastewater treatment upgrades? Because we're still hearing stories about overflows. We're still hearing stories about pollution, especially out of Baltimore City.
Well, my view is that the Bay Restoration Fund is a sturdy and stable fund. There are an increasing number of needs coming to it. So the funding that the governor helped champion at the national federal level with the Bay with the bipartisan infrastructure law, where we're going to be getting 144 million. Actually 154 million over the course of the year for wastewater and drinking water infrastructure is critically important to supplement the Bay Restoration Fund. The focus on climate resiliency being incorporated into our bay restoration program is a really important challenge. We know there's going to be more precipitation and runoff, and that can also lead to more overflows, which is why we need to come up with some innovative funding beyond just the public funding at the state and federal and local level with the private sector to help provide capital for infrastructure, because there are going to be more and more, as they age, the infrastructure systems, large or small age, they're going to need to be upgraded. So we don't see, continually increasing sewer overflows. I think the DLS, the analysis underscored that we don't directly control the weather, but we can invest in infrastructure funding partnerships and continue to focus on pollution prevention upstream within a sewer shed. And that should help reduce the costs. But I think you're right, that's an area, that's one of my biggest concerns is how do we use the latest science to factor in climate resiliency programs and continue to fund the infrastructure systems. Can't walk away from them. We got to have sustainable and durable partnerships where they're financed and upgraded, because they're going to need to be upgraded over time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I don't see any other questions, so thank you very much for being with us and your great work over at Maryland Department of Environment. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Secretary.
sir.
We're next headed for MES. Andrew Gray is again back with us as our analyst. Mr. Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maryland Environmental Service Capital Program here, looking on the front, the capital budget summary here, the State Water and Sewer Infrastructure Improvement Fund, around $26 million, and there's $6 million for Conowingo Dam dredging. In terms of the recommended actions, DLS recommends concurring with a fiscal 22 deficiency for the Eastern Correctional Institution cogeneration plant. This is a project we'll discuss more. It's a fund fuel conversion project. In terms of the general obligation bond recommended actions, DLS recommends deleting the general obligation bond authorization for the Conowingo Dam dredging, and then approving the funding for the state fiscal 23 funding for State Water and Sewer Infrastructure Improvement Fund, and then also a pre-authorization for fiscal 24. In terms of the overall budget summary, we're talking about three different components here. Let's get right into it. First one, the deficiency. So the $4.2 million costs to upgrade the Eastern Correctional Institution cogeneration plant from burning wood chips to natural gas has blossomed to around $16 million. So that's requiring deficiency in fiscal 2022 in order to be able to fund part of that. And Maryland Environmental Service also has some additional funding in terms of moving projects around and also using project reserve fund monies as well in order to be able to address the full component, the full price for this particular project. DLS recommends that MES describe what happened. How did it blossom or change from $4.2 million to $16 million, although we do recommend approval of the funding for that purpose. In terms of the CIP comparison, a little bit of bouncing around here, overall increase of $17.8 million, mostly in GO bonds. In terms of the projects for the State Water and Sewer Infrastructure Improvement Fund, this is the state side of things. There's also the Department of Natural Resources projects. There's even around 7 projects for each. Just highlight here the Camp Frederick project, $7.7 million, really moving quickly. $800,000 in federal funds from the military department to kind of get design going. They're really under a time crunch. You need to get that facility up to speed for water and wastewater systems due to a new Marine Corps Readiness Center that's anticipated to be completed in fiscal 24. So they're really under the gun to kind of get that project going. In terms of the Conowingo Dam, $6 million, already discussed. DLS's recommendations to delete the funding. Question really, I guess, is a matter of priorities. Is this the most effective way to use the funding to address the needs of the state? If it's to look at the state in terms of piloting dredging behind the Conowingo Dam as a priority, then perhaps the money could be used for that purpose. But if it's really trying to get into the issue of reducing the nutrients and sediments behind the dam, then really need to be focusing above the watershed in order to be able to kind of address that. DLS recommends MES comments on when it's really ready, because a study won't be ready until April or spring or potentially summer 2022, kind of looking at the beneficial use of the sediment that's being dredged, and then whether any other states have made any commitments to Conowingo Dam dredging, or is the Maryland kind of just going out there on its own. DLS then recommends the deletion of the funding because the study is not ready. That would kind of inform how the beneficial use of the sediments would be used. Then just a really brief note here, the local and corporate facilities are polluting a little bit more than they were previously, and this looks to be due to the fact that there's a couple of facilities that have been brought on that have some problems, and there's one facility that changes with the season and has a lot of pollution. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gray, for the analysis. Any questions for our analyst? Mr. Galley, I think you might want to mute yourself. Let's see, Dr. Glass is here from the agency. Dr. Glass, welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Barnes. Thank you for having us. Vice Chair Chang and members of the committee, thank you for hosting us this afternoon. For the record, my name is Dr. Charles Glass. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland Environmental Service. With me today are Deputy Director for KEDIC, Mr. Patel, our CFO, our Finance Managing Director, and Mr. Jeff Tosi, our Government Affairs Director. I would like to start by thanking Mr. Gray and the entire DLS team for their thoroughness and professionalism throughout this process. It is always a pleasure working with them on these important matters. You have our written testimony, so I'll try my best to keep my remarks brief. And I'll answer the two items that DLS requested that we respond to. On the Conowingo Dam, similar to Secretary Grumbles, we respectfully disagree with this assessment. On the first point, we expect, as he mentioned, we expect these results shortly this spring on our innovative reuse of the dredge material. With respect to the $6 million GEO bond request, this funding is entirely necessary for this project to continue. We have started to gain some momentum on finally solving this decades-old problem. With no other funding identified to my knowledge, this funding is critical for continuing our work. MES's mission is to provide operational and technical services to protect and enhance the environment for the benefit of the people of Maryland. I believe this Conowingo project is one of MES's shining examples of our organization's mission, and I truly hope that this project does not get short-circuited at this critical juncture. On the ECI boiler conversion, this is a little bit more lengthy response, but it's detailed because there has been a change in the amount of funding that's necessary to complete the project, from $4.2 million to $16 million. We've provided you with a detailed written response. I won't repeat the entire response, but I'm happy to summarize. The bulk of the cost overrun is to actually do the construction of the two boilers to convert 30-year-old boilers in this system, in this cogen facility. The engineer's estimate was completed in 2019, before COVID-19 and before anything was competitively bid. We advertised this conversion work in August of 2021, received a single bid of $10 million, $10.2 million. In November of 2021, we re-advertised immediately and received two bids, the low bid being $9.9 million. The same company, WM Schlosser, was the original and winning bidder of the second bid. So we made sure we didn't just have one single bid, but the price did not come down it came down 300 grand, but it did not come down significantly. The remainder of the cost overrun can be attributed to code compliance related to equipment changes, contingent measures for continued operations, complex integration of controls with the balance of the plant, and the extent of selected demolition. With respect to DLS's recommendation to approve the FY22 $7.2 million general fund deficiency appropriation, we concur with this recommendation and thank DLS for it. This concludes my testimony, and we would be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Dr. Glass, for your thorough response to the questions that were raised. Are there any questions for the agency? Seeing none. Oh, Delegate Bridges.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. It'll just be a quick question. Mr. Glass, good to see you. It's just getting back to the dredging again. I heard you say that you're waiting on a study to be completed. Does that include like a cost benefit analysis of the dredging?
So no, it's actually looking at materials, how those materials can be treated, dried, and then utilized in a manufacturing process. So we have some preliminary data that says the material could be used. Two different companies, I don't have it memorized, but I'm happy to share the results with you, where you could make brick, you could make building material, as Secretary Grumbles related. MES is not leading that effort inside Baltimore Harbor, but that has been an effort, innovative reuse, beneficial use of material to build wetlands, to use positively in the environment. This has been going on. MES has been a part of it for a long time. So, but the full cost and no, that's not the purpose of that part of the study.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Sir.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. So thank you again for being with us. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll move forward to Capital Morgan State University. Ian Klein is our analyst. Ian, Mr. Klein.
Great. I'm going to share my screen, so just bear with me for one moment, please. Okay, at this point, you should have the analysis up on your screen. This is going to be the capital analysis for Morgan State University. There are 5 projects for the university recommended for funding in the CIP, and these projects are found on the cover page. First project I'm going to discuss involves deferred maintenance and site improvements. Morgan has identified a backlog of roughly $200 million in deferred maintenance expenses, which this program is meant to address. And while there's no out-year funding included in the CIP, this is considered to be an annual program. Morgan utilizes a variety of methods to fund deferred maintenance programs, one of which this year is going to be the usage of higher education emergency relief funds from the various federal stimulus packages. The President should comment on how the institution plans to utilize funding from these packages to address deferred maintenance projects. Exhibit 1 on page 5 documents a shift in how this program is funded in the 2022 CIP. In the CIP, this program receives $16 million more than the 2021 CIP. This is the result of an acceleration of GO funds for deferred maintenance projects, budget capacity for deferred maintenance projects this year, changing university needs in the out years, and the administration's priority for facility renewal projects. It should also be noted that $10 million in PAYGO funding for deferred maintenance projects is included in the dedicated purpose account, bringing the 2023 appropriation to $20 million. The second project that I'm going to speak on concerns the Carter Grant Wilson building renovation. As seen in Exhibit 2 on page 7, funding for this project has been accelerated so that design can begin in fiscal 2023. Once completed, the building will house the School of Graduate Studies and the Division of International Affairs. The third project is the New Science Center Phase 1 Washington Service Center demolition. And the one item of note here is that the completion date of this project is September 2024, which is the same construction start date for the new Science Center. Now, this project has already been delayed once, so should a delay occur again, that could impact the construction start date for the new Science Center. The fourth project that I'm going to talk about is for the new Science Center, Phase 2, $7 million is included in the CIP to begin design this year. This is a project that has been an out-year project for several years, and now the first tranche of funding is going to be provided this year. Total cost of this project is expected to be $210 million, with substantial construction funding beginning in fiscal 2025. The last project identified for funding this year concerns the new Health and Human Services Building, Phase 2. Funded is included in the CIP for construction and equipment. Current total cost of this project is $164.7 million, which is $6.9 million more than last year's estimate due to high construction inflation. Construction is expected to be complete by March 2024. There's 3 out-year projects identified in the CIP, which are found on pages 9 and 10. And the one item that I'm going to speak on very quickly concerns campus renovations. This is a new project that was added to the CIP with funding to begin in fiscal 2026. This program would address projects that have surpassed the DBM definition of deferred maintenance, but will reduce the overall backlog. The addition of this program will allow Morgan time to clearly identify the scale of projects and submit facility program reports that identify the need for the renovation. Recommended actions are found on pages 2 and 3, and DLS recommends approving all items listed. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Klein. Any questions for our analyst? All right, we have Dr. Wilson with us, I believe. Dr. Wilson, I think I saw you earlier. There you are, sir.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair Barnes. First of all, we have several members of our team here. I was running late. We actually have a site visit today from the U.S. Secretary of the Army, and she's been on campus all day today. And so that's why I was late getting on the meeting, but since you had a delay, I was able to get here. But first, I have several members of our team here at Morgan with me. Sydney Evans, our Executive Vice President for Finance and Administration, Kim McCallum, our Associate Vice President, Cynthia Wilder, who is Director of our Facilities Program and Planning Office. And I think I saw Dr. Don Terryville, who is Vice President for State and Federal Relations. And so I want to start, Mr. Chair, always being cognizant of the committee's time by thanking the governor, DBM, of course, and this committee for your strong support, your continued support of Morgan State University. I thank our analyst, Ian Klein, for always doing a spectacular job in analyzing our budgets. And so just a couple of comments, and then we get straight to the questions. The investments that have been made in the capital facilities at Morgan really have gone a long way in enabling us to move the metrics here in almost every single category. When I arrived here at Morgan, we had a graduation rate, for example, of 29%. That was unacceptable, but students were leaving the institution and sometimes not coming because the facilities were just not comparable to facilities they were seeing other places. And so as a result of those investments, that graduation rate has moved 65% from 29% to almost 50%. And we are looking to move that well past the national average in the coming years. We are also are seeing historic 154-year enrollment increases in Morgan. We have the largest overall enrollment in the history of the institution, over 8,500 students. And we have the largest incoming freshman class, 2,400 students, which is a 90% increase over last year's entering class. We also, with those investments, have been able to move our research classification, Carnegie style, from an R3 moderate research institution to R2 high research institution. And we think that with the plans that we have in the queue for additional investment in our capital facilities, we are planning to move the institution to R1, very high research status in the coming years. And our Board of Regents has endorsed that plan unanimously. And we've been talking about it for 2 or 3 years. We also have seen philanthropic support, private sector support to Morgan increase historically. We were able to nab 2 very historic gifts, a $40 million gift from Ms. Mackenzie Scott, who is the ex-spouse of Mr. Jeff Bezos, and then another $20 million gift from Morgan alum Calvin Tyler and his wife, Tina. And those have enabled us to put in place some endowments to help our students financially and in other ways. And so all I can say, because we have our written testimony here, is that the capital investments that have been made in Morgan has enabled us to be in this immense period of transformation of the institution. Mr. Chair and other members of the committee, you can walk the campus and you can, feel the pride that the students here on campus now have as they traverse in and out of these facilities, and they're able to take their classes in very modern world-class classrooms and take their labs in world-class facilities. It means a lot to them because it says to them that you matter.
And in fact, Mr. President, we have. This fall, we took a wonderful tour and we saw it with our own eyes. It was fabulous. And thank you again for that. And your whole team for that tour. I know we talked about it during the operational budget hearing we did, but since we're on Capitol, we'll say it again. Thank you again for that great tour and the great things you're doing. Are there questions for Dr. Wilson or his team? Okay, well, I see my favorite Kim McCall up there. I want to say hi to her. And we thank you all again for your great work. All right, Mr. President, thank you for being with us.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have addressed the questions in our testimony.
Great, we will make sure we read them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're moving forward to BCCC, Baltimore City Community College. Kelly Norton is our analyst. Ms. Norton, welcome.
Hello, give me one moment to share my screen. Okay, you should be seeing that now. Okay, this year's capital improvement program has 4 projects, 2 receiving funding in fiscal 23. The Learning Commons Renovation Addition project, as well as the Deferred Maintenance Program.
Kelly, I'm not seeing yours. There we go.
Okay, here we are. The recommendations, DLS recommends approving the 3 items in the capital budget. The first project being funded is the Learning Commons Renovation Edition. Renovation Edition is an expansion of the existing Bard Library. The project has been accelerated from fiscal 2024 to fiscal 2023. The CIP includes $2,186,000 in fiscal 23 for the design phase of this project. And the total cost is estimated to be $34.5 million. The next is the Deferred Maintenance Program, which deals with BCCC's extensive backlog of maintenance projects. Fiscal 23 includes $4 million in general obligation funds and an additional $5 million in general funds budgeted in the dedicated purpose account. BCCC has provided a list of 35 shovel-ready projects to be used. This funding can be used for. There are 2 out-of-year projects. The first is the facilities building. And the second is a nursing building renovation addition. The facilities building is a new addition to the CIP. It will replace a temporary modular facility currently housing the facilities department with a new 12,210 gross square foot building. The total cost is estimated at $6.2 million. The nursing building renovation in addition was in last year's CIP. The design phase for this project has been accelerated from fiscal 26 to fiscal 25, and the total cost is estimated at $40.1 million. That concludes my presentation. I'll let
Great. Questions for Ms. Norton? Thank you for that great analysis. We appreciate you. Any questions for our analyst? All right, seeing none. Dr. McCurdy, I think you're with us. We hadn't had you on the list initially because I don't think there are any issues here in your capital budget, but I know you have an additional capital request you wanted to make, so we wanted to give you an opportunity to do that briefly.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, Chairman Barnes and Vice Chair Chang, members of the subcommittee. For the record, I'm Deborah McCurdy, President, Baltimore City Community College, and I'm joined by several of my colleagues, Michael Thomas, VP for Workforce Development. He also oversees the facilities area. Catherine Dixon, she's the Assistant VP for Facilities. Dr. Lizo Jones, VP for Academic Affairs. Becky Burrell, VP for Institutional Effectiveness. Thank you again for the opportunity. We wanted to be brief. We certainly support the recommendations in the governor's budget, which includes the $9 million for deferred maintenance and the 2.1 for the design of the Learning Commons renovation and addition. Let me also acknowledge Kelly Norton along with Matthew Klein for their support and the long hours back and forth in terms of preparing for the sessions. Well, we appreciate very much what was in the proposed budget. We know there are capital priorities that must meet with the facilities master plan in order to realize the vision for the campus. This is a college that has long since had a lot of neglect and abuse with regard to the facilities. In March 2019, just prior to my arrival, a facilities assessment of the college was completed by a consulting firm, Sightlines, specializing in higher education facilities. The assessment defined over $40 million in backlog and deferred maintenance, with about $31 million that needed some immediate attention and needs. Part of those immediate needs were lots of roofing, HVAC systems failing, not working, mold, and other kinds of maintenance that should have long ago been taken care of. What we do know is that there really had not been a true investment for deferred maintenance at the college up until 2022. This had created a great deal of neglect in the facilities, with many complaints and safety issues for our faculty and our staff and students, with elevators that simply had notes on them, don't ride unless there's only one of you. If you put 2 on, it probably was going to fail. These create safety issues for everyone. As far as the DLS recommended actions, We do concur and appreciate the 9 million in deferred maintenance and the 2.186 for the design of the Learning Commons. What we did want to do is bring 3 things, though, to the committee's attention. The 9 million, we're requesting the 12 million. You have a list of deferred maintenance, more immediate things that need attention. The Learning Commons renovation that we would ask, and we're seeking to get support for the nursing renovation. In addition, these 2 buildings sit side by side and they are gateways to the institution, and we're looking at the design money for the nursing building and health sciences building for that to begin concurrently with the Learning Commons area, which would be the 2.368 million for the nursing building and health professions to start concurrently with the Learning Commons. And then finally, the priority is on the Bard site, and we very much appreciate last year the 7.4 million to demolish the Bard building downtown. That is one of the institution's realignment tasks. And so with the support of Governor Hogan and Senate President Ferguson, 7.4 million was put into the supplemental budget for this demolition. What we're looking and seeking for is that the remaining funds from the demolition then be used for a needs assessment so that we can begin to program this site in order to pull together several other facilities that are downtown, where the college pays almost 3 million in lease dollars. And wanted just to have a moment for the Assistant VP for facilities, just to tell you about the nursing building, the extent of the deferred maintenance as well. I think will be helpful to share that direct information. Ms. Dixon, if you could do that, I know we need.
That'd be fine, Ms. Dixon. Just keep it brief. We hear you on the 3 programs that you need additional funding for, the facilities, the nursing. If you could just keep it brief, we're happy to hear from you.
Okay, thank you, Madam President. Good afternoon, Chairman Barnes and members of the Capital Budget Subcommittee. For the record, I'm Catherine Dixon, Assistant Vice President for Facilities. Thank you for the opportunity to expand on our additional priorities at this time. As the President noted, we have a $41 million backlog, and the study also said we had 30 million of that was critical for the next 2 years. Once we play catch up on that backlog, we would still require 3 to 4 million per year annually to keep up with our ongoing maintenance. We're requesting 12 million in deferred maintenance. As shown in Exhibit 1, significant projects added include main boilers, renovate the restrooms and lockers in the gym, and campus entry signage, wayfinding, and landscape improvements. With respect to the nursing renovation, the college requests the 2 buildings concurrently, with the nursing program being submitted to DBM last summer. The Part 1 and Part 2 was submitted June 25th. By accelerating the project and designing and constructing the nursing and the Learning Commons project together, certain efficiencies could be achieved with site aesthetics, architectural detailing, utilities and infrastructure, and the overall construction cost, while reducing the cost for both projects overall by avoiding the escalation and increasing the purchasing power of the contractor. This would also further reduce the need for deferred maintenance by addressing the nursing building sooner. If we wait, additional systems will fail. The nursing building is actually now 45 years old and is experiencing major failures. In fact, it's now reached the end of its useful life. Since we submitted our budget request to DBM last summer for the project to begin in FY24, additional systems have failed, including the cooling tower, doors, windows, the elevator, the fire alarm, and the controls have all now failed. So that's what, reason why we're asking to expedite the project beyond what we had submitted in the capital budget request. This project will provide a modern simulation lab and real-world space for nursing skills training in this demanding field, and provide, flexible, up-to-date space for general nursing, obstetrics, pediatrics, surg tech, occupational therapy, radiology, and respiratory therapy. It is at the entrance and sits adjacent to the library project, which will form the new gateway and circulation, providing a strong connection to the campus circulation and access. To begin both projects, we're requesting $2.368 million to begin design of the nursing building. Lastly, I would like to provide a quick update on the Bard building. DGS is currently soliciting proposals for the design team, and we plan to take the design award for demolition to the BPW on April 27th, with notice to proceed after MDE review November 28th. And just to note that this project was added to the supplemental budget, so we're requesting that any additional funding not spent of the $7.4 million be retained to allow us to complete a study needs assessment for a program that would be able to realize one of our realignment tasks, which is to get out of unused real estate and consolidate some of our leased properties, which we're spending, I think, over $3 million annually on 3 leases that we could consolidate to a state college-owned harbor site. Thank you for the opportunity to expand.
All right, thank you. And thank you, Dr. McCurdy. Are there any questions for the agency? Seeing none, I think that concludes our business here today. Thank you, subcommittee, for hanging in there. And everyone have a great day.
Wait. Barnes, we have Mickey.
Oh, shoot. Yeah. I'm sorry, we do have Mikula.
Mr. Chairman, how could you forget?
Oh my goodness.
You know, Mikula had a great lunch today where they honored our fearless leader, Chair McIntosh, and it was wonderful time. So I will never forget Mikula. I'm sorry, I had the sheet at the bottom. We love
Thank
Mikula.
you.
Morgan Smith is our analyst.
Trying to cut me off before I can even give my little spiel.
Yep. Thank you, Chairman Barnes.
Okay, here you go. Hopefully you can see that. Is it loaded? So I'll go through this pretty quickly. You're looking at the capital budget summary for MICUA. Their 2023 request totals $14.65 million, with 11.3 for MICUA projects and 3.35 for deferred maintenance. As far as recommended actions are concerned, DLS recommends approving the projects as they are: $5 million for the Hodson Science and Technology Center, $1.3 million for the McDaniel Environmental Center, Harvey Stone Pavilion, and the renovation of the existing greenhouse, and $5 million for the Black Box Theater. I will go through those in a minute. DLS recommends cutting the deferred maintenance, $3.35 million, and I'll briefly touch on that in a second. There's a quick Exhibit 1 overview of all of the money that MICUA has received since '97. This totals over $206 million, with the vast majority of this money having gone to Johns Hopkins University. Hood College has one project. It's the Hodson Science and Technology Center addition. Right now, their STEM programs are outpacing the amount of space that they have left over in this building. And so they're asking for $5 million in grant money to expand this building. And hopefully in the future, if they are able to expand, it will then house the School of Health Sciences, which will provide a greater number of programs available to students. The $5 million is approximately 25% of the estimated total cost at $20.3 million. And they expect design to conclude in October, and they would be ready for construction as early as January. The McDaniel projects, I'll briefly touch on the 3. The fiscal 23 budget includes $1.3 million for these 3 projects. The Harvey Stone Pavilion is an existing pavilion that needs a new roof and paving, among other things. The college would like to use this covered area for outdoor classes and other extracurricular uses. The McDaniel Environmental Center is a freestanding building that is currently set up in a residential manner, and they would like to reutilize this space for classrooms, and hopefully that would accommodate the environmental studies programs, among others. And the third project is the on-campus greenhouse renovation. Currently, the space is too tight to have both a classroom full of students and instructional staff in space. And their hope is with a renovation, they would be able to expand slightly the standing space and then the countertop workspace that they'd be able to use. And this greenhouse helps support several programs, including the environmental and food studies programs. The last project is Stevenson University. They want to build a multi-use black box theater building. And the budget currently has $5 million in grants for this building. They do have a black box theater currently, but it's very small and it's inadequate for what they need it for. And in addition, it's on a different campus, which I believe is about a 30-minute drive in one way for the students to get there to use the space. So in constructing the new building, it would be on the main campus that most of the students are on. It would also include not only the black box theater, but a administrative space for both administrators and staff, student classrooms, a scene shop, all of the necessary things to have a theater and media performance program up and running in this building. And the $5 million grant is only 39% of the estimated total cost at $12.7 million. The last piece is the deferred maintenance of $3.35 million. You'll note before that I said DLS recommends cutting this money. This money would be used across the 13 MICUA institutions for a series of renewal backlogs that they have, which totals $380 million. These are for things like roofs, doors, energy efficiency things, etc. We recommend cutting it because DLS is under the opinion that state resources should be used for the $1 billion in deferred maintenance at the state facilities and the University of Maryland system schools. So that is our recommendation, but otherwise we recommend approving the other three projects. And with that, I conclude my presentation and I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
All right, Ms. Smith, thank you for the great presentation. Are there any questions for our analyst? I don't see any, so let's move to the agency. Sarah Fiddler, Ms. Fiddler, I wasn't trying to forget you. We had a great time today and it was so great for you to honor Chair McIntosh in that way. And I know we all agree, well deserved for her.
We were glad you guys could come. Yeah, no, you've already seen us once today, so we will be quick. Thank you very much.
Take as much time as you need, and I'll let you introduce your team. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to start, and then I'll turn it over to them. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the subcommittee, thank you so much for having us. I'm Sarah Fiddler from the Maryland Independent College and University Association. We are so appreciative of state support for our students and our schools. We're grateful to be included in the capital budget again this year. We have two priorities, and we've had a chance to talk with some of you in advance, so we thank you for that. We have 3 fiscal 2023 projects, and we also are really interested in the deferred maintenance funding that I know DLS has recommended to cut, but we're going to talk to you about that further. So our 3 fiscal 2023 capital projects are at Hood College in Frederick, at Stevenson University in Owings Mills, and at McDaniel College in Westminster. And following my testimony, we'll have a representative from each of these schools tell you more about their projects, although Morgan did a good job. Thank you very much, Morgan. The projects are in the budget for $11.3 million, and MICUA is asking you to raise this by $2 million to be $13.3 million. And the reason for this is that just like everyone else, we are struggling with skyrocketing materials costs, labor industry challenges, and supply chain interruption. And so in addition to benefiting students and helping to advance the state's plan for post-secondary education, these projects will leverage external resources in excess of $24 million, as well as create over 250 construction jobs in the state. Our second priority is for deferred maintenance funding. And so the capital budget right now includes $3.4 million, and we're asking you to increase this to be $13 million, dispersed as $1 million for each of the MICUA schools. This first-time funding would be used to address accessibility for individuals with disabilities, energy efficiency and sustainability initiatives, doors, windows, roofs, and code life safety concerns on campus. We collected information regarding the inventory of these needs on our campuses, and we identified over $380 million in need, So this $13 million ask represents just over 3% of our identified need. Attached to my testimony, I know it's long, but begging your patience, we've included a sample of this inventory for your reference, as well as specific examples and discussions of just how impactful this $1 million will be on every single one of the MICUA institutions. Our campuses are old, and while we're proud of the history and tradition that represents, it means that there's room for a great deal of modernization. We find that donors are not excited to have a boiler or an HVAC system named after them. And also, as you know, the state's very generous capital support of our schools is limited to academic facilities. So this deferred maintenance funding would be able to repair some of our plumbing issues in residence halls or structural challenges in administration buildings, for example. The partnership between the state and MICUA institutions goes back almost 250 years. And because of this partnership, Maryland independent institutions often thrive in a way that independent institutions in other states do not. So we are so appreciative for this. We do not take it for granted, and we thank you for the opportunity to make these comments. So, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'm going to ask Rosa Rivera-Hanai to talk next, and she's from McDaniel.
Absolutely. Welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, my name is Rosa Rivera-Hanai, and I'm currently serve as the McDaniel College Provost. McDaniel College is really grateful for the Maryland General Assembly's continuous support of the MICUA Capital Grant Program and the recognition of that vital role Maryland's independent colleges and universities play in educating the next generation of change agents in our state. McDaniel is committed to access and affordability for in our area, and we have been ranked #1 by the U.S. News among best value schools for the North region for 3 consecutive years. So with the endorsement of MICUA, McDaniel seeks a $1.3 million state capital grant for fiscal year 2023 in support of a $2.7 million program to renovate and expand 3 experiential learning facilities on the campus. This improves spaces that total over 7,500 square feet will support our academic programs, research capability, and community outreach. The Environmental Studies program is a growing area of academic interest on the Hill, where we have had over 73% increase in applicants over the last 5 years. Hands-on research and fieldwork are cornerstones of our program, which provide experiential learning opportunities that give students that advantage over others as they enter the workforce. So the proposed projects, as they have been presented, first, we have the McDaniel Environmental Center, which is a hallmark of our environmental studies program. The expansion of this center will bring new opportunities to our students, which include the addition of a commercial teaching kitchen for our agri-food systems programs, a microscopy classroom, a green roof, and a seminar space. It's located about 10 minutes from campus, and its infrastructure also needs updating to support the increased traffic from students, faculty, staff, and community. Second is the Harvey Stone Pavilion, which is located right on campus, just off some of our athletics facilities. Its expansion into an outdoor teaching classroom space will impact experiential learning for students and also serve the community in the region. Lastly is our college's greenhouse. Right now, it's not accessible. So its expansion will provide that accessible academic space for our students and community, including virtual classroom capabilities that can be used by faculty and students for research, experiential learning, and of course, campus and community lead projects. We appreciate your favorable consideration of this $1.3 million MICUA capital grant request to renovate and expand experiential learning facilities at McDaniel. This will provide learning opportunities resulting in increased volumes of higher quality research at the institution. And I thank you again for your continued efforts and support of McDaniel College and of all of Maryland's independent colleges and universities.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us in your advocacy.
Chuck, you want to go next?
Sure, thank you. My name is Charles Mann. I'm the Vice President for Finance and Treasurer at Hood College. On behalf of Hood College, we also want to thank you for recognizing that capital support for the state's independent college and universities is a wise investment that benefits all of Maryland. We appreciate the General Assembly's steadfast support of the MICUA Capital Grant Program. This year, Hood College, with the endorsement of MICUA, is seeking a $6 million state capital grant in fiscal year 2023 in support of an estimated $20.3 million renovation and expansion of our Hodson Science and Technology Center. The requested grant will be augmented by fundraising and institutional funds. Initially constructed in 1957, with an addition built in 2001, 21 years ago, the Hodson Science and Technology Center is a 3-story structure that houses the biology, chemistry and physics, computer science and information technology, and mathematics departments. Growth of these STEM programs is being hampered, though, by an aging building that lacks sufficient instructional spaces and has deteriorating infrastructure systems. As the college has established a School of Behavioral Health Sciences, the demand on the science programs will increase and further impact the existing space constraints. We will not be, at this point, moving the new school into that building. Instead, we've decided to partner with our local hospital, Frederick Health Hospital, which is just next door to us, and we will be using some of their space to house our new school. However, all those students will be taking, obviously, biology and chemistry classes, which will add additional impact on the building. The project will also include, in addition to house a new biomedical research and training center, a program that capitalizes on Hood's partnerships with local biotechnology firms. The renovation will allow Hood to continue its growth in these much needed STEM programs. Approximately 73% of our undergraduate students and 81% of our graduate students are Maryland residents. And a vast majority of these highly qualified graduates will remain in Maryland and enter the workforce. Thank you again for your continued support.
Thank you, sir, for being with us today.
Thank you.
Melanie, you want to go next, please?
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Barnes and honored members of the committee. I'm Melanie Edmondson, CFO of Stevenson University. I as well thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today in support of this very important project for the university. As Morgan noted, access to our theater facility is nearly 30 minutes from the main campus in Owings Mills. The theater program serves over 240 students and 13 majors. Convincing these students to drive to the Green Spring campus to participate in events is very difficult, as you can imagine. Construction of the facility on the Owings Mills campus will enhance and support Stevenson's theater department, but it also serves a broader need for our campus and the surrounding community as a whole. As we continue to consolidate the traditional undergraduate programs to the Owings Mills campus, we don't have the appropriate gathering spaces for the student cultural groups, diversity and inclusion programming, academic presentations, and other student activities. This theater will provide the central gathering space for the Stevenson community to come together. Additionally, the opportunities for collaboration with the Jewish Community Center, Genesee, Irvine Nature Center, Garrison Forest School, and St. Thomas Church, of all of whom surround the Owings Mills campus, benefit the community as a whole. Without your support and that of the state capital grant, private institutions such as Stevenson would not have the ability to support these projects. I thank you for your consideration in funding Stevenson's Black Box Theater, and I welcome any questions concerning this project.
Okay, thank you for being with us. Are there questions for any of the representatives from MICUA?
You have one more person to speak, Chairman, if you don't mind. I have Nora Demleitner, the president of St. John's, and she's going to talk about the deferred maintenance part of our request, if that's okay. Nora, please.
Thank you, Sarah, and good evening. Let me also start by thanking all of you for your support for our higher education and independent schools in Maryland. It's truly unique, and I think this is why you have so many small liberal arts colleges in the state. We're a residential school. We're right next to the state legislature. And what I'm telling you now may unfortunately make you look at the campus slightly differently than you did this morning if you walked past it then. Our problem really is deferred maintenance. So we have 22 buildings on our campus, 3 of which were built in the 1700s, 6 of which were built in the 1800s, including some of our residence halls. Now, I can assure you, we redid piping and plumbing and heating at some point in the last 70 years, but not since then. And unfortunately, if you looked behind our walls, it would show. The front facade looks charming, but right behind the walls, we have leaking plumbing. We have occasionally bursting pipes. We have bathrooms that unfortunately now show mold and mildew. With your support, we would be able to not only take up the piping, but also the heating issues in one of our oldest and largest dormitories, and really turn the piping system and the heating system into state-of-the-art, much more energy efficient, also give us a chance to renovate our bathrooms, make them ADA compliant and ADA accessible. It would truly be a game changer and set the dorm on a great path for another 20, 30 years of beautiful, kind of on a beautiful view on our front lawn. I appreciate everything you can do in this respect. I know it looks like it's a small amount in the Maryland state budget, but for us, it would be a substantial amount. And anything you can do, I deeply appreciate, and I know my fellow presidents would as well. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you for that. We appreciate your testimony. Anyone else, Ms. Fidler? Okay. All right, well, I think that does complete our work today, unless there are any questions. But you can make a mistake once and they can forgive you, but twice you can't. Ms. Lambert, any other agencies we have here today?
No.
Okay. All right, I think we're done. Thank you all so much for hanging in there, and